Hi guys, it's Jeanet and welcome back to my channel. Also, if you're new here, I post new fashion, lifestyle and writing videos every week. And today is actually the second video in my Stick to the Script series, and I am going to be discussing the Avatar The Last Airbender cartoon show. Avatar The Last Airbender is an American cartoon series whose producers were influenced by the typical art style of anime. The series originally aired on Nickelodeon from 2005 to 2008 with a follow-up series called Avatar The Legends of Korra. So this is something that I've been wanting to discuss for a while now, and this was actually one of the main reasons why I started the series or first thought of the series. And ironically, it's become relevant again because Netflix just announced that they would be re-attempting a live action, but this time in the form of a TV series. So I thought I'd give you guys an idea of how I would like to have seen it done before I get the chance to be influenced by the way that Netflix has decided to do it. Before we go any further, I just want to issue a spoiler warning for the series as a whole. And because this is such an amazing series, I would recommend that you go watch it yourself, enjoy it, and then come back and watch this. But yeah, so I just want to put that out there. This is by no means spoiler free, and I also don't think that this video particularly is detailed enough for you to follow along with what I'm referring to if you haven't watched the series yet. But yeah, to summarize the setting:
water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could stop them. But when the world needed him most, he vanished. 100 years passed and my brother and I discovered the new Avatar, an airbender named Aang. And although his airbending skills are great, he has a lot to learn before he's ready to save anyone. But I believe Aang can save the world.
The main character in the series is Aang, a 12-year-old boy who was frozen in an iceberg for 100 years before he was found by Katara and Sokka. Katara is a young waterbender who is eager to improve Seige's skills of bending, but unable to do so since there aren't any waterbenders left in her tribe who can teach her. Sokka is Katara's brother who thinks bending is weird and relies on a boomerang as his weapon of choice. He's also the comic relief within the series. The fourth person in their group is Toph, a blind earthbender who develops her earthbending as a means to becoming strong and capable, despite her parents' objections and concerns about her disability. Moving on to Aang's enemies, Zuko is the Firelord's son, who was banished from the Fire Nation after disgracing his father. His banishment would only be removed if he manages to capture the Avatar. Then there's Iroh, who is Zuko's uncle and mentor, as well as being Zuko's only support. And finally we have Azula, who is Zuko's sister and a ruthless firebender. Of course, that doesn't by any means cover all of the characters within the series. It doesn't even cover all of the characters that I am about to mention within this video. But those are some of the most important ones. For people like Zhao or even Firelord Ozai, it is more important for you to just at least see their faces because their backgrounds aren't that relevant to what I'm going to be talking about. Now, full disclosure, I don't think my summary of the series does it justice, but this in a weird way proves a point that I want to discuss. The series had the potential to be very by the book and unremarkable, but it was the way that the producers decided to handle the story that allowed it to become the success that it is now. And herein lies the problem of why, in my opinion, the film adaptation ended up not being a success. It all comes down to the method of storytelling that the writers decided to use. And even though that might seem very straightforward, I still want to elaborate on it. Not only was the writing for the series compelling and well done, it also had the same kind of appeal that To Kill a Mockingbird had. in that it was told from the story of a child, or in this case, 3 children / teenagers. What's important in this choice of narrative is that in both cases, the subject matter is something that is usually considered to be quite dark and dreary. But because you're seeing it through the innocent eyes of children, though the effect of it isn't lessened, it does appear to be less dark, and you can actually see more hope within the story than you normally would. This allowed the writers to handle a subject as complex and dark as war in a way that would be compelling and understandable for both children and adults. My reason for laminating this so much is because I believe that it was the humor and the innocence that made the cartoon so successful, and I think that that was the thing that was missing from the live action remake. So if there is any hope of making a successful reattempt at a live action, then that mistake can't be repeated. For this reason, I think it's important that in this case they actually cast children instead of aging down an older cast. I also think that the color grading for an adaptation needs to be looked at very carefully, because in the Avatar The Last Airbender film, the way they color graded was very cold, and along with the way that they handled the story, it lent the story to being extremely dark and almost tragic, where it didn't necessarily need to be perceived that way. When you compare it to something like the first 2 Harry Potter movies, even though both the Philosopher's Stone and the Chamber of Secrets had their dark moments, because they kept the saturation high, it infused the films with a feeling of warmth. Moving on to the actual format that an adaptation would take, it is clear that the movie format doesn't work for Avatar The Last Airbender, because unfortunately they tried to fit an entire season of 20 episodes into a 1.5 hour movie, which, if they had continued that way, would have resulted into 3 1.5 hour movies for all 3 seasons. And if they were feeling particularly generous, they might have extended the 3rd season into a 2-parter, as they did with Harry Potter and Twilight. What I would rather have seen from the beginning is them taking it and doing a live action TV show, as Netflix is now doing. But I was actually thinking of maybe doing a battle of the adaptations, where I take the movie and face it off against the TV show. That is just a thought, because I'm quite curious how it would fare, but that's a discussion for another time. So the problem then lies with what kind of format is then appropriate for an adaptation of Avatar The Last Airbender. Although the fangirl side of me wants them to stretch it out as much as possible to ensure a good amount of time for character growth, I unfortunately don't think that is the wisest decision for maintaining an audience. I really enjoyed the Beauty and the Beast live action remake, and I found it to be extremely nostalgic, but because they stuck so close to the original Disney animation, any small changes that they made stuck out like a sore thumb. And I'm afraid that if Netflix were to attempt a long form of the Avatar series that would basically just be a copy of the cartoon but in a live action format, the same problem would arise here. So either they would have to stick to the cartoon 100% without making any changes, or they need to change up the format enough with the excuse of bettering the flow of the story. So since I don't think 24 episodes over the course of 3 seasons would be the best for a live action remake, here is what I would do instead. I feel like I'm about to make an extremely controversial statement, but here it goes. So I personally think it would be best to have a single season 13 to 14 episode series with individual episodes ranging in length from about an hour to an hour and a half, as you sometimes see in a British series. Now, I know that might seem extremely weird, but especially in the film climate that we are today, I don't think it's necessary for a series to be constrained to the 40-minute time slot like they used to be. so I don't think it is a reach to try and change the format up a bit. And despite how it might sound, I don't want the series to actually be rushed. I just don't think stringing the series along across multiple seasons would be the wisest decision. So I'm about to get into exactly which episodes I think would go into what in terms of doing the live action, but if I'm referring to specific events, I am going to be putting the actual episode of the cartoon here so that you can know where to go look for the events that I'm talking about. And when I am referring to that event, I do actually mean the episode that's stated here as a whole. So that being said, here is how I would condense it. So going by season, I first want to point out the episodes that I feel would unfortunately need to be left out of the live action remake. So in season 1, that would be episode 6, Imprisoned, episode 11, The Great Divide, and episode 12, The Storm. Then in season 2 it would be episode 2, The Cave of Two Lovers, episode 4, The Swamp, episode 5, Avatar Day, episode 7, Zuko Alone, episode 9, Bitter Work, and episode 15, The Tales of Ba Sing Se. And finally in season 3 it would be episode 2, The Headband, episode 5, The Beach, episode 9, Nightmares and Daydreams, and episode 17, The Ember Island Players. So of course within the removed episodes there will be things that need to be added in because otherwise important information could be lost. But if you do remove these episodes, it leaves about 4 episodes of the cartoon that needs to be condensed into 1 episode each. So I actually think this would work well if you handled each episode like an individual movie with the starting point, the middle ground, and then the climax. And I will be giving you an example of this by going into a bit more detail with the first episode, but from there the plot points that I discuss for each following episode will be less detailed. So going by what would be the episodes for the 14 episode live action, here is how it would be condensed. So the first episode would contain episode 1 to 4 of the first season, where Aang, Katara and Sokka meet. It's revealed that Aang is the Avatar, and the three are also introduced to 2 of the main antagonists, Zuko and Zuko's uncle Iroh. After the gang of 3 manage to escape from Zuko and Iroh, Katara and Sokka decide that they want to accompany Aang on his journey to the North Pole. During the first few days of their journey, they stop at the air temple that Aang used to live at, only for Aang to discover that all the airbenders had been slaughtered. Aang is distraught, but luckily Katara and Sokka manages to calm him down. They leave and Aang is still disheartened, but they soon manage to stop at a small town called Kyoshi, where they meet the Kyoshi warriors and find a small bit of peace before Zuko arrives and disrupts it. Though Aang is disheartened by the trouble Zuko caused, he finally begins to understand his duty as the Avatar when he helps the town before leaving. Using this kind of story structure for most of the episodes would allow there to be a contained story arc and climax within each episode. Continuing on from that, the second episode would contain Aang meeting an old friend who has become an Earth King. After that would follow Aang's first voyage into the spirit realm. He receives instructions from Roku's spirit to meet him at the fire temple, which leads to a confrontation on the winter solstice, ending with the reveal that a comet that will be arriving in under a year will give the Fire Nation the power to win the war and destroy the balance of the world. Episode 3 would contain Katara, Aang and Sokka obtaining a Waterbending Scroll in order to help Aang with his waterbending. It would also contain their meeting and subsequent problems with Jet, and would end with Aang's capture at the hands of Zhao and Zuko helping him disguised as the Blue Spirit. And also Zuko's backstory would need to be worked in here somewhere to make up for the removal of episode 12. Episode 4 would contain the Fortuneteller and the eruption of the volcano, as well as the meeting with Sokka and Katara's father's friend, Bato. Episode 4 would also contain the group's journey to the Northern Air Temple and their meeting with the engineer who builds flying contraptions. Finally, the episode would finish on Aang meeting Zhongrong, trying to learn firebending and having to fight Zhao. Though I am well aware that these two episodes were originally in a different order, in terms of the overall arc of the story, I felt it best to end the episode here instead. Episode 5 would contain the arrival of the North Pole, Katara's struggle with the waterbending teacher, and finally the siege of the North Pole and Aang and his allies' eventual victory against the siege. This would also conclude the first season of the cartoon in terms of the live action. Episode 6 would focus on Aang's attempt to control the Avatar state, the group's return to Omashu and the subsequent adventure, and the group finding Toph and getting her to be Aang's earthbending teacher. Aang getting a hint about how to find Toph, as well as all the information about Zuko's past, would need to be added into this episode. Episode 7 would focus on Aang and the group's encounter with Azula and their journey to the library. It would also deal with the subsequent discovery of the eclipse, Alp's disappearance, and finish off with their journey through the Serpent's Pass. Episode 8 would include the Fire Nation's drill and the group's journey into Ba Sing Se. It would also have Appa's struggle of trying to get back to Aang spliced in throughout the entire episode. The episode would end after the events with Jet at Lake Laogai. Finally, episode 9 would contain the group winning over the Earth King of Ba Sing Se's trust, Aang's meeting with the Guru, and the battle between the group and Azula, which would finish up the episodes of Season 2 for the cartoon. Episode 10 would naturally start with the events of Aang's awakening after being struck by Azula's lightning. After those events, it would cut between Katara's masquerade as the Painted Lady and Sokka's journey to becoming a swordsmaster. Finally, the episode would finish with Toph and Katara being used as bait by Combustion Man and the gang's escape from him. Episode 11 would contain the background of Avatar Roku and Firelord Sozin, the events of Katara learning how to bend blood, and the events of the eclipse would also take place in this episode. Episode 12 would focus on Zuko becoming Aang's firebending master and teaching Aang firebending, and would end with the journey of Sokka and Zuko rescuing Sokka's father and finding Suki. Episode 13 would include Katara and Zuko's search for Katara's mother's killer, as well as the gang spreading out for the fight against the Fire Nation. Aang would also find the way to stop Firelord Ozai without killing him in this episode. The final episode would contain the showdown between Aang and Firelord Ozai, and with that it would conclude the series as a whole. But yeah, so sorry for the lack of detailing throughout the episodes, but this is just kind of a rough idea of how I would string the events together if it were to happen in this kind of format. Still, I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. I would really appreciate it. My social media links will be in the description box below if you want to contact me, and let me know if you think I should do a movie versus live action TV series once the Netflix show is out. Thanks once again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!